Back in 2007, India and the European Union kicked off negotiations for a free trade agreement. It looked promising at first, but by 2013 the talks had collapsed. Why? Because India kept pushing demands that didn't make sense, like protecting its chaotic bureaucracy, demanding easier visas for Indian workers, and refusing to lower tariffs on European goods like wine, cars, and cheese. It was like India wanted all the benefits of global trade without any of the responsibilities. Europe, quite rightly, walked away. But India kept calling, asking the EU for a trade deal and touting itself as the world's largest democracy that should be aligned with the EU. But the EU ghosted them for 8 long years, and for 8 long years, nothing happened. India didn't fix its economy, it didn't cut red tape, it didn't become more competitive, it just got louder. "Make in India," they shouted. But when you look at the numbers, manufacturing's share of India's GDP barely budged. Foreign investors kept complaining about corruption, delays, and unpredictable rules. Apple tried building iPhones in India and immediately ran into labor strikes, poor quality, production delays, and factory fires. Not exactly the next China, right? First, I want to highlight a comment on one of my recent videos detailing this manufacturer's experience with trying to get foreign investment into India. I'll summarize the points. They said that Modi promised digital documentation is as good as the original, but banks still insisted on paper ID, which takes a very long time to acquire and organize. Basically, Modi has no real control over banking infrastructure as the banks didn't listen to him. The government also promised to organize transport and accommodation for investors while the manufacturer only had to convince them to come to India. But surprise, there was no such aid provided and the individual had to bear the full cost. The village panchayat chief or block chief has the final say in such matters. If they're Modi supporters, then they'll demand a heavy bribe. If they're anti-Modi, then they'll just stall your project. Investors assume decent road and rail infrastructure somewhere between ASEAN and South Korea, but when they arrive, they realize it's more like Uganda or Tanzania. According to the UN, the bare minimum for law and order is a police-to-civilian ratio of 250 police for every 100,000 civilians. India has about 132 for every 100,000. Go figure. When folks find out your project is FDI-backed, suddenly the Brahmin local leader wants a separate section for veg food. Dalit leaders want something else. Muslim leaders say Muslim girls can't talk to stranger men and demands gender separations. You're responsible for your own contract enforcement. You gotta be Puncturewala or Kasai with a suit to make it in India unless you started your enterprise a long time ago. Commercial courts come under civil law for most parts and these cases drag. And even if you do survive all of these things, you'll be pressured with political patronage. Refuse and the ruling party will slap huge fines on you. Not even giants like Samsung are spared. Accept and things are fine. Until the opposition comes to power, then you get a crippling fine. Lose-lose situation. That was a long and insightful comment on the difficulty of doing business in or with India. The sheer bureaucracy, red tape, incompetence, corruption, and cronyism is a recurring theme and explains why it's such a hard country to deal with. No wonder why the EU ignored India's trade deal request for 8 years. And while India was festering in chaos in the background, China was building an entirely new map of trade. While India was chasing Europe, China was quietly connecting Asia with roads, railways, and pipelines. And this week, President Xi Jinping showed up in Astana, Kazakhstan for the second China Central Asia Summit, not with empty speeches, but with concrete deals. China pledged billions in investment. Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries are getting infrastructure, energy projects, and new trade corridors that don't involve India at all. No red tape, no drama, just progress. Xi didn't go there to ask for favors. He went as a partner with deep pockets and a clear plan. China's already Central Asia's top trading partner and growing fast. Because China doesn't care much as long as you don't talk too politically against it. If you're willing to build business and trade relations without all the moral grandstanding, then China is a willing partner. Meanwhile, India can't even build a decent highway to its own border in Ladakh, let alone connect to Central Asia. And now it seems Europe comes back to India, or at least is willing to hear them out. Maybe they're desperate. They've lost access to Russian energy. They're panicking about Chinese dependency. So they turn back to India thinking, maybe this can be our backup. But instead of being realistic, India shows up to the table with the same old list of demands: special protections, limited market access, and of course the fantasy of becoming a global manufacturing hub. The wait in India and fake in India dream. It's delusional. The EU wants access to India's 1.4 billion people. But what they get is a maze of bureaucracy, broken infrastructure, and outdated policies. They want to sell high-end products, but India keeps tariffs sky high. They want predictable regulations, but Indian laws shift like the wind. No wonder European negotiators are frustrated. I also wonder what exactly India can offer the EU apart from rice, curry powder, and frozen samosas. Honestly, those are the only things in my house that's made in India. Sure, this trade deal is incorporating the expected early harvest, so agricultural products will be key. But trade between India and the EU has grown a lot organically, and mainly in the service sector. It's the cheap customer service and call center workers who piss off most Europeans who hear their voice over the phone. Now compare all of this to China's approach in Central Asia: clear objectives, consistent policy, and fast execution. This meeting is also symbolic because it's the first time that the 5 Central Asian countries are holding a summit in the region with a leader of another country. Russian influence is still quite large within these countries, but let's be honest, Russia's power is waning. They've got a war on their doorstep that's been dragging on for years now, a demographic time bomb, and an unrefined, underdeveloped, and undiversified economy. China spots an opportunity to cement its influence in Central Asia and replace Russian regional hegemony. This isn't a slight against Russia, it's just a fact of life. China's rise over the past few decades has been remarkable, so much so that many economists call this century the Chinese century. Why would Central Asia, as a region that borders China, not want to partake and benefit from this rise? Why would it stay on the sinking Russian ship while China's rising tide lifts everyone else up? I applaud Central Asian leadership for recognizing this, but I warn them not to try and play multiple sides who are at odds against each other, like India tried to do with Russia and Ukraine. We see how that went. India being accused of supporting war and authoritarianism by the West, while being berated and sidelined by Russia. Here's the real picture. The world doesn't revolve around India. And while New Delhi throws trade tantrums and clings to its imaginary superpower status, Beijing is building the future, one rail line and one oil deal at a time. While Modi is playing as the power man with a 56-inch chest who can bring India to greatness, Xi is greeting world leaders with his usual smile and soft candor, offering strategic partnerships. While Indians suffer in red tape and cronyism, Chinese power on through research and amazing technological developments, backed by the economic powerhouse of their manufacturing base, which they achieved decades ago. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that subscribe button. We break down global politics without the fluff every week.